device and turn around. Now! You don't belong here!
I'm a city contractor and a retired Army major. My ID is on my chest.
I didn't ask who you think you are. You fit the call.
Working isn't a crime, officer. You're escalating nothing.
Hands behind your back! Last warning!
At 29 years old, Vance was the picture of what the department looked for on paper. Fit, clean-cut, punctual, and eager. But beneath the pressed uniform and the polished boots lay a dangerous cocktail of arrogance and insecurity. He operated under the belief that his authority was absolute, and that any question regarding his commands was a personal insult. On a bright Tuesday morning in October, he received a dispatch call regarding a suspicious individual in Centennial Park. The individual in question was Major Marcus Thorne, a 52-year-old retired U.S. Army Ranger and a highly respected structural engineer. What Vance did next, ignoring protocol, escalating a non-existent threat, and forcing a disabled combat veteran into the dirt would serve as a stark, expensive reminder of what happens when power is given to those who lack the temperament to wield it. Before we dive into the details of this case, where are you tuning in from? If you believe that those who serve our country deserve better than this, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us hold the system accountable. Centennial Park is the crown jewel of the city's downtown district. It spans 40 acres of manicured lawns, walking paths, and historical pavilions. It is a place of peace usually filled with retirees getting their morning steps and city workers on break and tourists admiring the architecture. It was 10:15 a.m. The sky was a crisp, cloudless blue, and the autumn leaves were just beginning to turn gold. The morning air was cool, the kind that requires a light jacket. Major Marcus Thorne stood near the North Pavilion, a historic stone structure that the city was planning to renovate. Thorne wasn't just any contractor. He was the lead structural engineer for the project hired specifically for his expertise in historic preservation. Standing at 6'4" with broad shoulders that had carried rucksacks across deserts and mountains, Thorne was an imposing figure. He was dressed in clean work boots, dark canvas work pants, and a thick navy blue sweater. Around his neck hung a heavy-duty lanyard displaying his city contractor identification and his access pass. Thorne was a man of precision. He had spent 25 years in the Army, rising to the rank of major leading men in high-stress environments where a single mistake meant death. He had retired with a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star, carrying shrapnel in his left knee that made standing for long periods painful, though he never complained. He moved with a deliberate, calculated slowness that projected calm. On this particular morning, he was using a laser distance measurer, a small handheld digital device to verify the integrity of the pavilion's stone arches. He would point the device at the arch, record the number on his clipboard, and move to the next angle. He was focused, professional, and entirely within his rights to be there. He wasn't bothering a soul. He was doing the job the city paid him to do. But to one observer watching from a park bench 50 yards away, Marcus Thorne was a threat. And in her mind, threats needed to be neutralized. Sheila Redcorn, 55, had lived in the affluent neighborhood bordering Centennial Park for 3 decades. She considered herself the unofficial guardian of the park's propriety. She was the type of resident who memorized the schedule of the landscape crew and called the city if the grass grew half an inch too high. She spent her mornings sitting on her bench watching the world with a suspicious, narrowing gaze. When she saw Marcus Thorne, she didn't see an engineer. She didn't see a grandfather or a veteran. She saw a large black man holding a device she didn't recognize, staring intently at a building. In Sheila's worldview, men who looked like Thorne didn't inspect buildings in her neighborhood. They damaged them. She watched him for 5 minutes, her imagination running wild. Was he casing the pavilion for copper wiring? Was he planning to spray paint graffiti? Was that device in his hand a weapon? She pulled her phone from her designer handbag, her fingers trembling with self-righteous adrenaline. She dialed 911. The operator answered with the standard greeting. 911, what is your emergency? Sheila lowered her voice, shielding her mouth with her hand as if Thorne could hear her from 50 yards away. "Yes, I'm at Centennial Park near the North Pavilion. There is a man here behaving very suspiciously. I think he might be planning to break into the maintenance shed or vandalize the structure." The dispatcher asked for a description. "He's a black male," Sheila said, emphasizing the race. "He's very large, huge. He's wearing dark clothing and he's holding some kind of black object. He keeps pointing it at the building and looking around. He definitely doesn't belong here. He looks like he's on drugs or something, just standing there staring." The dispatcher asked if he was being aggressive. "Not yet," Sheila lied, adding a dramatic pause. "But he looks like he could snap at any moment. I'm afraid to walk past him. Please send someone before he destroys public property." The call was logged. The nuances of worker or contractor never made it into the dispatch notes. The information relayed to the patrol units was condensed and urgent. "Centennial Park North Pavilion. Suspicious black male, large build, possibly casing the location, holding an unknown black object. Caller reports, subject appears unstable." Officer Kyle Vance was 3 blocks away when the call came over his radio. He hit his lights, though he kept the siren off, wanting to catch the suspect in the act. Vance had been reprimanded twice in the previous year for attitude issues during traffic stops, but he viewed those complaints as the whining of people who didn't respect the law. He considered himself a sheepdog, protecting the flock from the wolves. In his mind, he was already en route to a confrontation with a criminal. He wasn't going to investigate. He was going to dominate. Vance pulled his cruiser up onto the paved walking path, tires crunching over the gravel, stopping just 20 feet from where Thorne was working. The sudden intrusion of a vehicle in a pedestrian zone caused several walkers to stop and stare. Vance exited the vehicle, leaving the door open. He adjusted his belt, resting his hand near his holster, a signal of aggression. He didn't walk with the casual stride of a community officer. He marched with the stiffness of a man looking for a fight. Thorne, hearing the car, turned slowly. He lowered his clipboard, but didn't drop his laser measure. He watched the officer approach with the same tactical assessment he had used in overseas conflict zones. He saw the tension in Vance's jaw, the bladed stance, the hand hovering near the weapon. Thorne knew immediately that this was not a social call. "Hey!" Vance shouted, closing the distance rapidly. "Back away from the structure, hands where I can see them." Thorne didn't flinch. He didn't raise his hands in surrender, nor did he make any sudden moves. He simply stood his ground, holding his equipment in a non-threatening manner. "Good morning, officer," Thorne said. His voice was a deep baritone, the command voice he had honed over 2 decades of leading soldiers, calm, resonant, and carrying an authority that usually made junior men straighten up. "I am conducting a structural inspection for the Parks Department." He gestured slightly with his left hand toward the lanyard on his chest. "I have my credentials right here." Vance stopped 10 feet away. The calmness of the man unnerved him. Suspects were supposed to be nervous, apologetic, or running away. They weren't supposed to speak to him like an equal. "I didn't ask for your life story," Vance snapped. "I said step away from the building. Drop the object in your right hand. Now." Thorne sighed internally. He recognized the type. He had seen young, hot-headed privates like this before, men who mistook volume for leadership. Slowly, deliberately, Thorne bent his knees and placed the laser measure on the grass. He stood back up, dusting his hands. "The object is a laser distance measurer, officer. It costs $300. I am placing it down." Thorne looked Vance in the eye. "I am Major Marcus Thorne, U.S. Army retired. I am the lead engineer on this renovation project. If you look at the permit on the clipboard or the ID around my neck, we can resolve this misunderstanding immediately." "I don't care what you say you are," Vance retorted, stepping into Thorne's personal space. The size difference was palpable. Thorne had 3 inches and 50 pounds of muscle on the officer. This physical inferiority seemed to enrage Vance further. "We have reports of a suspicious person casing this location. You fit the description. Large black male loitering." Thorne's expression hardened. "Working is not loitering, and I suggest you lower your voice and check my identification before you escalate this any further." Vance's face turned a shade of red. "You don't give orders here." "I do. Turn around, hands behind your back. You're being detained for investigation." "For what crime?" Thorne asked, keeping his hands visible but refusing to turn. "I have committed no crime. I have identified myself. My vehicle is parked right there with the company logo." "You are making a mistake, son." The word son was the tipping point. Vance's ego couldn't handle the paternal dismissal. "That's it," Vance hissed. "Failure to comply." Vance didn't reach for his handcuffs first. He reached for violence. Without a verbal warning, Officer Vance lunged forward. He attempted to grab Thorne's left arm to spin him around. Thorne reflexively stiffened his arm not to fight, but to maintain his balance. "Do not touch me," Thorne stated firmly. Vance shouted, "Stop resisting," and drove his boot hard into the side of Thorne's left knee, the exact spot where the shrapnel scars lay beneath the fabric of his pants. The pain was blinding. Thorne's leg buckled. It wasn't a takedown born of skill. It was a cheap shot designed to cripple. Thorne groaned, a low, guttural sound as his equilibrium failed him. He crumbled toward the earth, his hands instinctively going out to break his fall. He hit the ground hard, the dry dirt puffing up around him. His clipboard clattered against the stone foundation of the pavilion papers, scattering in the wind. Vance didn't pause. He jumped onto Thorne's back, driving his knee into the veteran's spine with the full weight of his body. "I told you to comply," Vance screamed, playing to an audience that was rapidly gathering. "Give me your hands." Thorne was gasping for air, the weight on his lungs making it difficult to breathe. The pain in his knee was a white-hot fire radiating up his thigh. "My hands are right here," Thorne gritted out, forcing his arms behind his back despite the agony. He knew that any movement could be interpreted as reaching for a weapon. He had to survive the officer's panic. The scene had attracted a crowd. A group of power walkers, mostly women in their 50s, stopped on the path. A man walking his golden retriever froze. Phones were pulled out. The camera lenses focused on the white officer kneeling on the neck and back of the well-dressed black man. "He wasn't doing anything," a woman shouted from the path. "He was working. We saw him measuring the wall." Vance ignored them. He wrenched Thorne's arms upward, forcing the shoulders to the breaking point, and slapped the handcuffs on. He ratcheted them tight, tighter than necessary, the metal biting into the wrists. "You're under arrest for trespassing, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest," Vance announced, breathless from his own exertion. Thorne lay with his cheek in the dirt. He closed his eyes for a second, mastering the rage that threatened to explode. He took a deep breath. He needed to be smarter than the man currently humiliating him. "Officer," Thorne said, his voice strained but audible to the witnesses recording him. "My contractor ID is hanging around my neck. My military ID is in my back pocket. You are currently assaulting a federal contractor and a field-grade officer. I want you to remember this moment." Vance scoffed, hauling Thorne to his feet. Thorne couldn't put weight on his left leg. He stumbled. "Walk," Vance commanded, shoving him toward the cruiser. "I can't," Thorne said through gritted teeth. "You injured my knee. It's a service injury." Vance rolled his eyes. "Yeah, right. Everyone's got a bad knee when the cuffs go on." Vance dragged Thorne to the car, essentially carrying the larger man's weight while making it look like Thorne was dragging his feet. He shoved Thorne into the back seat of the patrol unit. Thorne had to twist his body painfully to fit his long legs into the cramped cage. Vance slammed the door, the sound echoing like a gunshot across the quiet park. He walked back to the spot of the arrest, grabbed Thorne's laser measure and the clipboard, and threw them onto the front passenger seat of his car. He didn't bother to collect the scattered papers. He got behind the wheel, heart pounding, feeling the rush of adrenaline that he mistook for righteousness. He looked in the rearview mirror. Thorne was staring right at him, not with fear, not with anger, but with a look of absolute terrifying pity. The drive to the precinct was short less than 10 minutes. Vance played the radio loudly, trying to drown out the silence from the back seat. He radioed ahead. "One male in custody, resisting. Large suspect had to go hands-on." He wanted to set the narrative before they arrived. Thorne sat in the back, controlling his breathing, mentally cataloging every violation. Failure to identify, failure to investigate, excessive force against a passive subject, unlawful arrest. He knew the regulations better than Vance did. He knew the law, and he knew that the next hour was going to be very interesting for the precinct commander. When they arrived at the station, Vance pulled Thorne out of the car. Thorne limped heavily, unable to hide the limp. Vance marched him through the sally port and into the booking area. The booking room was busy. Officers were typing reports. A few people were waiting on benches. Behind the high desk sat Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 60 years old, a Vietnam veteran who had stayed on the force past retirement age because he loved the job. He had seen everything. He knew every cop in the precinct, and he knew the good ones from the bad ones. He looked up as Vance came in, pushing a limping, handcuffed man in a dusty sweater. Miller's eyes narrowed. He looked at Thorne. He saw the haircut, high and tight graying at the temples. He saw the posture shoulders back, chin up, despite the handcuffs. He saw the eyes, the 1,000-yard stare of a man who had seen the elephant. Game recognizes game. Miller stood up slowly. "Vance," Miller grunted. "What do you have?" "Trespassing at Centennial Park," Vance said, puffing out his chest. "Suspect refused to leave, refused to ID, resisted arrest. Had to put him down." Miller looked at Thorne. "That true partner?" Thorne spoke clearly. "Sergeant, I am Major Marcus Thorne, U.S. Army retired. I was conducting a structural inspection on the North Pavilion under contract with the City Parks Department. This officer refused to look at my credentials, assaulted me, and arrested me without cause." The room went quiet. Miller walked around the desk. He didn't look at Vance. He walked straight to Thorne. "Major?" Miller asked, respectfully. "Yes, Sergeant. My wallet is in my back right pocket. My CAC card and my retired ID are in there. My city contractor badge is around my neck, turned backward." Miller reached out and gently turned the lanyard over. The plastic card read, "City of Metro. Official contractor. Marcus Thorne, P.E. Structural engineering." Miller's face went pale. He then reached into Thorne's back pocket, pulled out the wallet, and opened it. The military ID confirmed it. "Major, Ranger tab." Miller closed the wallet and turned to Vance. The look on the sergeant's face was one of pure, unadulterated fury. "Vance," Miller said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "give me the keys to these cuffs." "Sarge, he was acting suspicious. Keys. Now." Vance handed them over his hand, trembling slightly. He started to realize something was wrong. Miller unlocked the cuffs. Thorne rubbed his wrists, deep red grooves visible in his dark skin. He winced as he shifted weight onto his good leg. "Are you injured, Major?" Miller asked. "My left knee. Shrapnel injury from Afghanistan. I believe the officer tore the meniscus when he kicked my leg out." Miller closed his eyes for a second, visualizing the lawsuit that was about to hit the department. He turned to Vance. "You kicked a disabled veteran, a city contractor, because he was standing in a park. He wouldn't show me his ID." Vance stammered, the arrogance evaporating. "I tried," Thorne corrected, his voice icy. "He told me not to move my hands." Captain Henderson, the precinct commander, walked out of his office, drawn by the tension. "What is going on here?" Miller looked at the captain. "Officer Vance just arrested Major Marcus Thorne for doing his job. Vance ignored his credentials, assaulted him, and dragged him in here. Major Thorne is the lead engineer on the Centennial Park project." The captain looked at Thorne, then at Vance. He looked at the contractor badge. He looked at the swelling forming on Thorne's knee. "Vance," the captain said. "Badge and gun. Conference room. Now." Vance looked like he had been slapped. "But sir." "Now." Thorne was offered a chair and an ice pack. An ambulance was called. The captain apologized profusely, but Thorne held up a hand. "Save it, Captain. I want the body camera footage preserved. I want the dash cam preserved. And I want the name of the person who called this in." "We will take care of everything, Major," the captain said. "You'll take care of it when my lawyer calls," Thorne said, standing up painfully. "I fought for this country for 25 years. I didn't survive Kandahar to be treated like a criminal in a park I'm helping to build." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The video from the park hit the internet within 4 hours. A jogger had recorded the entire interaction from the moment Vance exited his car. The title of the video was "Hero Treated Like Criminal in Centennial Park." It showed Thorne standing calmly. It showed Vance screaming. It showed the kick. It showed the knee on the back. By the evening news, it had 2 million views. The internal investigation was the fastest in the department's history. They didn't just look at this incident. They pulled Vance's entire jacket. They found 14 prior complaints. Excessive force against a teenager. Rude and abusive language toward an elderly woman. Racial profiling allegations that had been dismissed as unfounded. It painted a picture of an officer who had been a ticking time bomb, protected by a system that prioritized shielding its own over policing the community. Thorne required surgery on his knee. The recovery would take 6 months. He couldn't work. The project was delayed. The city council was furious. The mayor, facing an election, publicly condemned the arrest. Major Thorne filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. He didn't ask for an apology. He asked for justice. His lawyer laid it out simply: unlawful seizure, excessive force, battery, false imprisonment, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The city attorneys looked at the video, looked at the medical reports, and looked at the jury demographic. They knew if this went to trial, the jury would give Thorne whatever number he wrote on a napkin. They settled in mediation. $1.4 million. Officer Kyle Vance was fired. But it didn't stop there. Because of the egregious nature of the assault and the clear violation of civil rights, the state licensing board revoked his certification. He would never work in law enforcement again. He was 29, unemployed, and nationally known as the cop who beat up a veteran. Sheila Redcorn, the caller, was identified in the police report. While she faced no criminal charges, the court of public opinion was less forgiving. Her name was leaked. Neighbors stopped talking to her. She became a pariah in the very community she thought she was protecting. In the end, Marcus Thorne donated a portion of his settlement to a legal defense fund for veterans who had been mistreated by police. He returned to the park a year later to finish the inspection. He walked with a cane, now a permanent reminder of that Tuesday morning. This story isn't just about a bad apple. It's about a system that let a bad apple rot for 5 years until it poisoned everything around it. It's about the assumption of guilt that black men face even when they are heroes. It's about the fragility of freedom when authority is unchecked. $1.4 million is a lot of money, but it doesn't fix a knee and it doesn't erase the memory of a boot on your neck. What do you think? Should officers be required to carry personal liability insurance for cases like this? Or should the cost always fall on the taxpayers? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We're going to keep telling these stories until the pattern changes. Thank you for watching.